Hello, my name is Asal Shokati, Ayurvedic practitioner, healing artist, and consultant to holistic professionals. We are continuing the series of interviews with other practitioners, esteemed guests, and we're kicking it off on a new platform, YouTube. So today I have a wonderful guest of honor, Nick, that we have connected over the past few years, talking about working together. I've been pursuing Nick for a long time, and life changed, things happened, and we are back again and connecting this way. So I'm bringing Nick to you instead of bringing him to Houston, where I live. I'm bringing him to you online. And without further ado, I'd like to just share with you a little bit about Nick and hand the microphone to him to continue telling you about his journey. So Nick is an integrative coach in private practice. He specializes in individual, family, and inherited trauma, embodiment, applied neuroscience, and energy work. He is a board member of the Focalizing Institute, and he's received a lot of training from the founder, which he will introduce to you himself. And he is also a very, very active systemic family constellation therapist. So I have done personal work with him. I've had sessions with him, and I'm somehow a little bit familiar with his style, but I wanted to bring him to you because he has amazing, amazing love, compassion, and grace in what he does and the people he supports. So, Nick, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Asal.
My pleasure. Nick, would you like to tell us a little bit more in detail about what you do, where you studied these modalities, and just get a little bit more technical before we go further into this interview?
Sure. So I think a way of understanding what I do, I call myself an integrative coach, which really just means I bring together many different modalities into one practice that's kind of all my own. The two pieces of it that I think help people understand where I'm coming from is one, that I'm really interested in embodiment work. So how we experience ourselves, not just in our mind, but more holistically. I also really believe very strongly that our body is one of our earliest warning signs when we're living out of alignment, when things aren't working, when we're not eating well, when our relationships aren't working for us. Our body, through its felt senses, it's kind of the language of feeling, tells us a lot very early on. And so I think it's really important that people cultivate a relationship to their body and learning how it speaks to them, because it's kind of like a protector for, again, being in situations that don't work, being in work situations that aren't healthy. It's often the first warning sign that something's off. So I teach people embodiment. That's a big piece. And then there is this second piece, which is the piece about inherited trauma and family constellations and ancestral work. And that is something that can't possibly be summarized in a few sentences, but it's the best I can do is to say that, a lot of people have done therapy where they spend time acknowledging how they were raised and how that might have an effect on their present day experience. What ancestral work looks at, what my work looks at, is the way that you can't really understand how you were raised without really going back and understanding, okay, how were your parents raised by their parents, and so on and so forth, back through the generations. And what I do, this is what I read about and what I integrate in my work a lot, is that there is really an effect not only to kind of internal family history, but also big historical events. Things like family migrating across the world has a huge effect on family history and is something that generations, you know, after the move are affected by that. And I you know, think of things like war, um, genocide. So Family Constellations has a really deep history. You know, it was pioneered in Germany, and many of the first people that engaged in the practice were on both sides of um, the Holocaust. So Jews that were trying to reconcile, who am I when there's this lost generation behind me? And then Germans who were asking the question, who am I when I look at my father or my grandfather, and you know, they were the guards, they were the murderers. So it's really a deep practice. But the place where I think they meet, and I do feel like they meet in so many places, is that, so our body is really our, I believe, our direct connection to our family. You know, we look like them, we sound like them. Um, we unfortunately experience the illnesses that they experienced later in our lives, and so when we go inside and when we're connecting with our body, it's a really helpful place to also acknowledge that there's even a history to our physical body too.
Thank you for explaining that. I mean, even though we have just a little bit of time, you did a really good job explaining it. I would like to know an example or two when you speak about embodiment and our body speaking to us when something is not right. Give us some examples so the audience become more familiar.
Sure. Um, I mean, there's so many. You know, I think maybe an example that I hear the most, that maybe the most people would identify with, is anxiety. That a lot of people, so anxiety is experienced in many different ways. There's often a thought component to it, and sometimes that's the part that people are most aware of. But and this happens all the time when I'm working with people, we talk about how even if it's the thought of what's going to be happen, or there's like a fear coming up, there's always a feeling there underneath. And I would argue that sometimes the feeling, I would say very often, that the feeling comes first. It starts in the body, and then the mind starts racing to try to come up with an explanation for why something feels wrong. So I teach people to start with the body first, and to really, it's very hard to make sense or rationalize with anxiety. So I think going into the thoughts and trying to understand them often makes people that much more anxious. So I think anxiety comes up with work. It comes up in relationships quite a bit. I think stress is another big one that I think we're in a time where a lot of people were forced to slow down over the last year, and now perhaps have a moment to evaluate, like, is this work really working for me? Or is this relationship really working for me? And that's a funny thing about all embodiment work, is that slowing down is kind of a prerequisite to all of it. So it's funny, we all kind of engaged in a little bit of an embodiment practice by being forced to slow down and listen to ourselves, whether we wanted to or not, obviously.
Interesting. You mentioned that, and I immediately thought about the highly sensitive people and empaths who are in this profession of as practitioners to support other people. So a lot of sensitivities in them have already been heightened, and they may even feel others, but even theirs can kind of intensify.
Well, so for practitioners, the example I would give for them is that their body is often the first sign that the boundaries are off. So if they're not charging what they're worth, if they're not creating boundaries about how they're interacting with their clients. For instance, maybe they're looking at email at all times of the day and night, and not creating structure. Often, they'll start to feel burnt out, and kind of broken down. And again, I think our body is like the first place where we start to really notice something is wrong here.
So it's not just oversensitivity. It is really a warning sign that we need to take seriously.
I think so. And I think for some people, sensitive people, connecting with their body sometimes is more natural for them because they're already in that space a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say person by person what would be oversensitivity, but I think being in service to people, whatever modality it is, requires an enormous amount of energy. And if the boundaries are off, if the self-care isn't in the right place, it gets bad real fast. So I think that's anyone, not even quote unquote sensitive people.
I agree with you. And this is the very first time we seriously talked. We had not a session, but a meeting. You asked me how I think Ayurveda is related to your work. And maybe then I didn't have a proper answer to give you, but just going back to this model that I've been focusing on, which is the Koshik model. They talk about the 5 bodies: the physical body, the energetic, the emotional and mental, and then getting into the intuitive, and the next layer, the bliss body, which they call it the bridge into our inner essence. Again, our body is the most tangible, and in this expression, in this life, this is not something to be dismissed. This is something to be nurtured and nourished. And I'm happy to hear that this is where a lot of modalities come together. Maybe at some point, the practices of leaving the body and being detached from the body was revered. But in this day and age, we need to revere this body. We need to be nurturing it. And this is a focalization and getting to know our body and embodying experience is very important.
Yeah, I think we're in a moment where detachment from the body is the norm. I think we spend just in school, the whole way it's set up, we're sitting in desks, we're not engaging our body except for maybe 1 hour of the day in phys ed, and we're just focused in a mind way, trying to take in as much information as possible. And I think technology does the same. I'm not anti-technology by any means, but just that we can easily sit for 2 hours like this, and it's all of our experience is happening between our brain and the screen. And it's I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I have this all the time where I'll stand up and realize I was sitting in a way that was hurting my back almost the entire time I was sitting there, and I didn't even realize that. And now I'm kind of sore in some way. And I think that's just a really small example of, I think, how easy it is right now to really ignore that part of ourselves. And I love what you bring in about Ayurveda, where the body work is really deep. It's really powerful. As we get deeper and more connected with what's happening there, it can be a portal to our internal compass. A lot of people connect with their sense of intuition through their body. The feelings that come up feel like a guide for them. So this is not just like about stretching and feeling energized. It's really a deep practice to go into the body. And I'll just speak for myself. I always found somatic work, embodied work, much more approachable than simply meditation and trying to kind of use mantras. And that's, everyone's different, but for some people, connecting with the body is actually much more, it's easier for some, for whatever reason.
That's a great point. Again, looking at it from the perspective of Ayurveda, I don't want to make it all about that, but it's is very much related to a lot of people who are practitioners. They do transcendental meditation or this and that or whatever. They're yogis or teachers and practitioners. I personally have found out that the deeper we go, first of all, if our exterior knowledge expands, meaning we read, we educate ourselves, we have all these tools, but most of the times it relates to the mind. So we get into the analysis paralysis eventually towards ourselves or towards the people we work with. And then also the deeper we go, the deeper we discover things about ourselves. The traumas can come up, family stories can come up. You know, people talk about epigenetic and all that stuff. It's all there. It's just waiting for that light to get there to unravel itself as part of our journey of self-discovery. And you get to those points that the traumas need to be recognized and healed. So I believe your work comes in as an important aspect of this healing. That, yeah, so esoteric practices open up portals where we need to do a lot of the work ourselves at this point.
Well said. I don't have anything to add to that.
Well, I'm happy we're in agreement. So you did ask me about the purpose behind these calls, and it is really to offer to the viewers what options are out there, what opportunities are out there. The people I have been interviewing are the people that I have worked with, and I've seen the tremendous amount of effect, even like sometimes few sessions working with them, depending on where we are on our path, can have in helping liberation and expansion, allow for more flow and really eventually more inner peace that exudes out of us. So I would like to take this interview further, but I also want to ask you to walk us through a practice when you feel appropriate. So we get a feel of how this work that you do work.
Sure. So I can give you a really, I think a really nice practice that combines this idea of family systems work, which has quite a bit to do with, okay, did we belong in our family? Did we not belong in our family? What role did we play? Were we the golden child or the black sheep or the neglected one? And a lot of that work looks at how that role has this funny way of following us. So I'll just set that up by just a little background saying how important belonging is to our well-being. And so this work combines that and a little bit of embodiment. So if the people who are watching are interested in trying a little practice, we can do a little just 5-minute practice. And the way we start is we start with a little intention. When I think of intention, I'm just thinking, is there something that you're working on or something that you feel stuck in, or a place where there's a lot of friction in your experience that you'd love to learn more about or support or bring more awareness around? So if you can just take one moment to name that, and you can always pause this and come back to it if you want to take a little time to think. So once you have that, what you do is you just start to close your eyes. You can also go into a soft gaze just a few feet out in front of you if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes. And I'm just going to suggest bringing the focus of your attention down to your feet. So it's almost like thinking of your attention as a spotlight, and you're just shining that spotlight on your feet and noticing on the inside, how do your feet feel? Are they making contact with the floor? Do they have socks or shoes on them? And just picking up on those subtle sensations in the feet. You might also notice the temperature of your feet and noticing that it might feel warmer on one side or in one area, colder in another. And then I'm going to recommend bringing that same attention up to whatever it might be, your seat or at your back. So if you're sitting on a chair, just noticing that contact underneath you with the chair. And if you're laying down, noticing that contact between your body and what you're laying on. And very similarly, just noticing your weight on that thing. And you might even let yourself sink in just a fraction of an inch. And then we're going to do one more to just keep getting a little bit more connected, a little bit more embodied. And it's to bring that focus of attention to the center of your chest and just start to watch the natural rise and fall of your breathing. No need to control it. Just seeing if you can notice one breath to the next as best you can. At this time, I'm going to ask you to, just on the inside, repeat back your intention. So maybe it was to explore something in particular, or to get more clarity about something. To repeat back that intention and notice what the first thing that happens in your body when you repeat that back. So it's kind of repeating the words and noticing, is there tension? Is there heat? Is there movement? Seeing if you can pick up on even a really subtle first reaction. And when you do, and you can take your time, but when you do, starting to bring attention to that place. If it's really clear, the feeling, you might place a hand wherever you're noticing that. So if it's in your chest or in your arm or head, just for a moment, placing a hand there. And then there's one more step, which is either on the inside or out loud, seeing what happens if you say to this feeling, you belong. And just noticing whatever happens next. Noticing what it's like to give that feeling permission to be here by saying you belong. Watching whatever it does, no right or wrong. Maybe even noticing overall if there's any shift in your body to hear that language, you belong. And then from here, we're just going to bring it to a landing and kind of bring with us whatever we learned, no right or wrong, whatever we experienced. Sometimes these things are abstract and they make more sense later. Sometimes they're just abstract. Sometimes they're really clear. So just starting to bring it to a landing, which is that you might wiggle your toes or your fingers. And really slowly and gently coming back to your space. And just reconnecting for a moment where you are to where you are. So I'm sure everyone had a completely different experience, but I wonder if that opened anything for anyone. So I guess maybe find me and write to me if that was interesting to you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll share your information in the link. If I may share, it was very illuminating because the moment I repeated to it, you belong, it's like as if a light got turned on and the light started going to shine different areas of my body. So it's like more cohesion happened versus the resistance of, oh, no, I don't want you to be there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You're old.
mm-hmm,
Tried and true. Please leave.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This practice really gets at this sort of this I'd say a foundational piece of embodiment work, which is that we have to sort of let go of our problem solving mindset of, okay, what's the issue? What's wrong? How do I get in there and fix it? And start getting curious about what would it mean to befriend something, to let it belong, to give it space to be here. And very often that is much more sustainable and much more powerful for people when it comes to um, just understanding and developing relationships to this complicated, very deep human being that we are.
I totally agree. When we do this kind of work, it is a part of us. It is us. It's not anything foreign, anything outside. It's not some thought or idea or philosophy. It is just really as real as it is felt in the body. So it does create a sense of trust, at least for somebody like me. Very powerful.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Nick, this is really, really powerful work and very subtle, but very deep and powerful. You do teach a lot of people. You are, I know you have events coming up, and we're doing this recording in 2021, summer of 2021. But hopefully this will be viewed much later than that. Tell us about that, but tell us about your trainings and what people can get out of it, what kind of people find it beneficial to participate in the trainings and the focalizing work. And I don't know if you train in family constellation or not.
Yeah. So what I've been doing quite a bit still while everything is mostly at a distance is that I train practitioners on how to integrate focalizing, which is a huge part of the practice we did. I would say that practice was a really good example of just like how my practice looks, which is that it's a lot of, again, synthesis of ideas, but focalizing is really the foundation of what everything is built on, partly because it's such a helpful tool. You know, you had mentioned trauma, that sometimes when we go deep on the inside, we do connect to some of the residue of some of the more painful moments of our lives. And having embodiment is so helpful when we meet those moments, when they show up. So yes, so I train practitioners on how to use focalizing. It's therapists, it's coaches, it's yoga practitioners, and it's a 10-week online program. We're just about to get done with our second class of 2021, and then we'll be back again in the fall doing another class. We're also thinking about doing a shorter program for just individuals that want to get better about their own personal practice and integrating body work and embodiment into that practice. So that's on the agenda as well. And then, yes, so Family Constellations I am going to be starting a training probably in November. It's something that Constellations work started in a group format. It was done in circle with people, and it's something that I was actually in the middle of a training program when everything shut down. So the people that were part of that training will come back, and it will also be open to new people, and that'll be happening in New York City. So I think that covers most of the training that I'm doing. I love to teach, so it's a lot of what I do.
Well, that's beautiful. You also have a retreat coming up in October, correct?
Yes. So I will be back in Mexico in Mazunte, which is like a really beautiful part in Oaxaca. And what I'm doing is it's a retreat that's really built for this moment in time. You know, I feel that that the pandemic's effects we're not even on people's mental and physical health, we're not even fully aware of it, and I don't believe that things are just going to bounce back like we're back to normal when it comes to our internal world. I think there's a lot of processing that has to happen. I think we've been in states of survival, whether we knew it or not. I think our bodies were on high alert for much of this time, depending on where you were living and how proximity to people and all that. So this retreat it's built for people who feel connected to being of service to others. So it's practitioners, it's people that might be entrepreneurs or nurses, people that feel called to be in service. And it is a retreat, a 1 week retreat to really serve as this sort of bookend to like, okay, like the last 20 months, 18 to 20 months or so when the retreat happens, we're, honoring that, talking about it, having a space to be in a community to hold that, and then working with some practices, because I do a lot of stuff about intuition and internal compass, working on some practices to help you clarify what it is you want to bring to the world and what you want to give moving forward. I just hear from so many practitioners that they're sort of in this rethinking mode right now about like, I don't want to do what I did before. Like, maybe parts of it will stay, but not, it's got to look different. It's going to have, I'm not the same person I was back in early 2020. And so this retreat is really a space to have those conversations. And it's in like tropical paradise in Mexico, in a really very safe area, right near the beach. And it's just like a really restorative thing. And it's funny because for me, I feel retreats and workshops are a big part of my gift to the world. So not only is it there for other people to come and really own their purpose and find clarity, but I feel it's a return to my sense of purpose as well. So I'll be a part of that circle, experiencing it to some degree as well as I'm sharing these practices and mentoring people.
That's amazing. I picked it up as, oh, it sounds like such a gift somebody can give to themselves by being there and allowing. It's all about allowing to digest and move on.
Yep. Yep.
So tell us about where people can find you. I'm going to share the link below, but you tell us. And
Sure. So I'm on social media. I would say the main place is on Instagram, and it's NWERBER. So my first letter of my first name and my last name is the handle. And I'm also on Facebook, so you can find me at Nick Werber. I also have a website, which is nicknwerber.com. It's got my middle initial in there. And yeah, I write a lot. That's a big thing. So if you're interested in this work, but maybe you're not looking for a private coaching, or maybe you're busy at that time, that retreat happens in October, by the way. I realized I didn't mention that, but if just follow me for the writing, because I write a lot about these topics and the philosophy of embodiment work, and it's a cool community. That's how I know us all, and I find I've been connected to some really amazing people like Asal just through being a part of that platform.
Thanks. You write amazingly, and I love reading when you do posts because it makes us really ponder. And it's very engaging, so the community gets engaged in the answer, and thank you.
Yes, that's a good, there is a part of what I write that is like a make you ponder sort of a thing, which is why I don't post as often, because I think I'm always like trying to raise the bar in some way. So that's funny feedback. But yes, it's supposed to be pretty thought provoking. So I'm glad you said that.
I enjoy it. I always look forward to reading longer pieces by people that I enjoy reading their thoughts or, senses and intuition outbursts. So thank you, Nick, so very much for giving us this time, giving me this time again. Your presence is such a gift, and I do hope with open hearts that the folks who are to find you, need to find you, will find you through this platform or others. And we are building a greater community together. Thank you for your participation. I ask people to please do check out my website, www.asalshokati.com. I'm going to post a link below. I am on Instagram, mystically.asal. And please do subscribe. There will be lots and lots of interviews and a lot of amazing other practitioners that I've worked with and do believe in their work who are going to be featured in these videos. So thank you again. Thank you, Nick, so much, and see you all later.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
What a pleasure.